I spent 34 years trying to convince people that being alone wasn't the same thing as being unwanted. My family spent those same 34 years making sure I never forgot that they believed it was. And the worst part wasn't that they never saved me a seat at birthdays or weddings or Sunday dinners. The worst part was that after enough years of watching everyone shift their chairs a little closer together while I stood awkwardly holding a casserole dish or balancing a paper plate on my lap, I started believing maybe I really didn't deserve one. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 34 years old and I work as a hospice nurse in Columbus, Ohio. I spend my days helping people through the last chapters of their lives. I sit beside hospital beds when families are too busy. I hold hands when people are scared. I listen to regrets, old stories, and final wishes. Strangers often trusted me with their last breaths. My own family barely trusted me with a folding chair. Funny how life works like that. I wasn't always invisible, at least I don't think I was. When I was little, before life separated everyone into categories and labels and comparisons, I used to believe my family loved me the same way they loved everyone else. Back then, Grandma Evelyn made it feel true. She lived in the same white 2-story house she'd shared with Grandpa for 48 years. The house smelled like cinnamon, old books, and lavender lotion. There were framed photographs everywhere, Christmas cards taped to mirrors, a grandfather clock that chimed every hour. A basket full of yarn beside her recliner, and there was always room, always, no matter how crowded the table became, no matter how many cousins came over. Grandma would smile and say, "Scoot over, babies, love makes room." I didn't understand then how important those words would become, or how desperately I'd cling to them years later. My parents, Robert and Linda Bennett, had 3 children. There was my older brother Michael, then my younger sister Ashley, and then there was me. Michael was the success story. Ashley was the beauty and I was reliable, responsible, quiet, useful, not special, never special. Even as a child I noticed the difference. Michael got baseball trophies displayed in glass cabinets. Ashley's dance recital photos covered the walls. My report cards got a distracted smile. "Good job, sweetheart," Mom would say while washing dishes, and that was that. Dad attended Michael's games religiously. He videotaped Ashley's performances. When I won first place at the science fair in 8th grade, he forgot to come. Forgot, that's the word he used. Sorry, pumpkin. Work got busy, except later that evening he drove 2 hours to watch Michael's baseball tournament. Mom kissed his cheek proudly. Nobody noticed I cried in my room, except Grandma. She always noticed. She showed up with chocolate milk and oatmeal cookies. I heard somebody won a science fair. I smiled through tears. "You remembered," she looked horrified. "Baby, some things deserve remembering." Then she hugged me. Grandma gave hugs that made broken things feel temporary. I think that's why I loved her more fiercely than anyone else. Not because she favored me, because she saw me. Those are different things. By high school, the comparisons had become obvious. Michael was dating cheerleaders. Ashley was prom queen material. Meanwhile, I liked books and volunteering at nursing homes. I wasn't ugly. I wasn't weird. I just wasn't shiny. And families like mine worshipped shiny things. At Thanksgiving, relatives would ask Michael about sports scholarships. They'd ask Ashley about boys, then they'd turn to me. "Still reading all those books, Clara? Such a quiet girl. You'll find somebody eventually, as if I was already behind schedule." I smiled because that's what I did. I smiled and helped wash dishes, smile and refill drinks, smile and disappear. Then came college. Michael became an accountant, Ashley studied marketing, and I became a nurse. Dad actually frowned. "Hospice? Yes, that's depressing," Mom agreed. "You always choose sad things." I shrugged. "I like helping people." Ashley laughed. "Of course you do. Clara likes fixing broken things." I smiled. But Grandma squeezed my hand under the table, and later she whispered, "Broken things need love too." When I graduated nursing school, Grandma was louder than everyone. She cried through the entire ceremony, made embarrassing signs, clapped so hard her arthritis flared up. Afterward she hugged me and said, "I'm proud of the woman you became, not the grades." Not the career, the woman. Nobody had ever said that before. By 28, Michael was married with 2 kids. Ashley had a handsome husband named Brian and endless Instagram photos. Meanwhile, I had a small apartment, long shifts, and a cat named Oliver, and apparently that made me a tragedy. Family gatherings became unbearable. Every single event followed the same pattern. Christmas, Easter, birthdays, anniversaries, everyone had assigned seats. Couples together, kids together, and me, I got whatever remained, sometimes a stool, sometimes the couch. Once I sat on an upside-down milk crate in Ashley's backyard. Nobody noticed, or maybe they did, maybe they just didn't care. The worst part was the jokes. Oh, Clara doesn't need much room. She's used to being alone. Save seats for actual families. Everyone laughed, everyone, including my parents. I laughed too, because if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. And crying made people uncomfortable. One Christmas Eve, I arrived carrying homemade pecan pie. The dining room glowed with candlelight. 20 people sat around the table. No empty chairs, not one. I stood there holding pie. Ashley blinked. Oh, Mom glanced around. Guess we forgot, Michael chuckled. Clara can eat in the living room, Dad laughed. She's always hiding with books anyway. Everyone laughed, everyone except Grandma, 81 years old, tiny and frail. She pushed herself up. No, the room quieted. She pointed at my father. Robert, move, Mom's move. Dad blinked. What, you heard me, but she is your daughter. Silence. Grandma looked around the room. Love makes room. Nobody argued after that. Dad sat on a folding chair. I sat beside Grandma, and while everyone resumed talking, she leaned close. Never apologize for taking up space, sweetheart. I almost cried into the mashed potatoes. After dinner, Mom complained. You embarrassed your father. Grandma answered before I could. No, Linda, her voice sharpened. You embarrassed yourselves. That shut everyone up. But only temporarily, because families like mine didn't change. They paused, then resumed, year after year. By 32, people had stopped asking if I was dating. They moved on to pity. Poor Clara, still single. You work too much. You need to lower your standards. You know men don't like independent women. Clocks ticking. Ashley especially loved those comments. She'd smile sweetly while twisting the knife. You know, Clara, being alone at your age must get scary. I'd smile. It isn't. She'd tilt her head. Really? Brian would laugh. I can't imagine coming home to an empty house. Then they'd kiss dramatically. Everyone smiled, and I'd pretend I wasn't dying inside, because loneliness isn't always being alone. Sometimes loneliness is sitting in a room full of people who make you feel invisible. Grandma knew. She always knew. Every Sunday I'd visit her. We'd drink tea. Watch birds through her kitchen window. Play cards. Sometimes she talked about Grandpa. Sometimes she'd tell stories from childhood, and sometimes she'd simply sit quietly beside me. One afternoon she asked, "Do they still make you feel small?" I stared into my coffee. Not intentionally, she snorted. "Bull," I laughed. She pointed a crooked finger. "Don't protect people who hurt you. They don't mean it. Baby, cruelty doesn't need permission to wound." I swallowed hard. "They think something's wrong with me." Grandma reached over and touched my cheek. "There's nothing wrong with peace." She looked out the window. "The world treats women like unfinished stories unless they're wives and mothers." Then she smiled sadly. "But some women become entire libraries." I cried, not dramatically, just quiet tears. She held my hand, and we sat there watching cardinals outside her feeder. I wish I'd known how few Sundays remained, because 6 months later, Grandma Evelyn started forgetting things. At first it was small, keys, appointments, names, then bigger things. Once she called me Margaret, her sister who died 30 years earlier. She cried afterward, "I'm losing pieces." I hugged her. "No," she smiled weakly. Yes, and she knew. Hospice nurses know death, and Grandma knew life. She recognized what was happening before anyone else, but my family, they argued over logistics. Over medications, over expenses, over who would inherit the house. The house, not Grandma, the house. Michael wanted to sell it. Ashley wanted the furniture. Mom worried about jewelry. Dad complained about costs. Meanwhile, I spent every free hour sitting beside Grandma, brushing her hair, reading aloud, cooking soup, changing bandages, holding hands. Nobody asked me to, I just did. Because she had done it for me my entire life. One evening, while rain tapped softly against the windows, she looked especially tired. Her hands trembled. She squeezed mine weakly. "They don't visit much." "No, busy," I lied. "Busy." She smiled sadly. "You're still protecting them." I looked away. She reached for something in her drawer, a photograph. It showed me at age 8, missing front teeth, science fair ribbon, huge smile. She laughed softly. "You remember this, you came. Of course, you were the only one." Her eyes filled. "You look so disappointed." I smiled sadly. "You brought cookies," she chuckled, "and chocolate milk." Then she became quiet, very quiet. And after a moment she whispered something I'll never forget. "Clara, thank you for seeing me." I squeezed her hand. "I love you," she smiled. "I know." And then she said something strange. Something that wouldn't make sense until much later. "Love makes room." Then she winked. "As long as people deserve seats." I laughed. "What does that mean?" But she simply smiled. And changed the subject. I didn't realize then that she had already made decisions. Important decisions, quiet decisions, the kind nobody saw coming. Because Grandma Evelyn had spent 82 years watching people carefully, and she remembered everything, every kindness, every absence, every cruel joke, every empty chair. And somewhere deep inside, behind those tired eyes and trembling hands, she had been paying attention, to all of us, including me, especially me. And none of us, not Michael, not Ashley, not my parents, not even me, had the slightest idea that Grandma's final gift wasn't going to be money, or the house, or jewelry, no. Grandma Evelyn's last gift would be something far more powerful, the truth, and that truth would shatter my family forever. I still thought Grandma's funeral would be different. People say death changes things, that grief softens hearts, that families come together when someone important is gone. I should have known better. Because even at Grandma Evelyn's funeral, they still couldn't find room for me, and this time they made sure I knew it.